If someone feels that they fail at a certain spiritual practice, how can they learn their errors and come back fresh?
I'm not sure what you mean by fail.
I mean, if let's say someone, let's just put it in the simplest sense. If someone's doing a practice and they hope at the very least to get some sort of inner peace, and their mind is racing just as much as ever, and they don't have that peace that they were hoping for, the peace that passeth all understanding, or even just a bit of normal peace, and they feel like their practices have failed to produce results. And I know you've a couple of times said, "Oh, well, that's the problem." But let's just say, trying to do something good for their psyche. If they've, let's say, quote unquote, failed in that, though there's no real failures, how can they basically, fix what they've been doing wrong, or change their mindset or attitude and come back and look at things fresh and get things working?
Well, it helps to have some humility about it and not give too much attention to your disappointment. Because if something doesn't work, maybe it's time to reevaluate.
Well, yes, and let's go back to the point you made earlier, which is a spiritual practice not necessarily fails because it is providing, after all, a lesson. The question is, how can you learn this particular lesson?
The problem is you didn't know that lesson was a possibility.
Right. That's certainly true.
You thought you were too narrow in what you expected it to be worth.
Yes, and I think that's true. And in that sense, there isn't any failing a spiritual practice because it's always a lesson.
Right.
But at the level of the stated problem, sure, there are things one can do. One can take a break. One can try to get some advice, either by formulating the problem and talking to anyone about it, or by finding a competent spiritual person who has some experience and asking that person about this feeling or this attitude or this practice and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, when I try to do something and it doesn't work, I wasn't thinking about spiritual, but just in general, that's what I take away from that is that I didn't understand it. I did what I knew to do and it wasn't good enough. So therefore, it's something I need to understand. And that's valuable.
It is valuable.
Realizing you need to understand something that you thought maybe you did before.
To the degree that one's serious about the spiritual life, it's about learning.
Yeah.
It's not here we go again. It's not about getting it right. It's about knowing. It's about
and discovering rather than having criteria in advance.
All right. So can we pull out an example of this kind of thing that might help be a little less general in the response? I mean, something like, I've been meditating every day for a decade and I'm still not at peace, that kind of thing.
Well, yeah, that's a good.
Or something simpler.
Well, that's simple.
Okay, you want to take that one?
I would say that sometimes, I think we touched upon this a bit. First of all, when the person acknowledges or feels, as in the word feel is being used, it's a huge step, because for one to realize or to even invest that sort of time to ask this question, I feel like I'm failing, is a huge acknowledgement and a step in their spiritual journey, because a lot of us are not there yet. And then understanding whether it's the practice that's not resonating with them, or whether it's the method of how they're doing the practice that's not resonating with them, and seeking counsel from fellow travelers goes along there too.
Yes, agreed. And it's also possible, in fact, it's actually more likely that the problem doesn't really occur in that practice. The problem occurs somewhere else in the constellation of their life and value and practices that's really exposes their weakness in this practice. This failure is an indicator that something else is missing. I think I see that a lot in the world of spiritual practice, where people say, I've been doing meditation for 25 years and nothing's happened. Well,
then it's a success.
That's success. Well,
when nothing's happening, you're doing it right.
Another thing that I think is interesting is very often you're the worst judge of your own progress.
Yeah.
You can go as a child, you can go 3 years and think I've not grown an inch, and yet you've grown 1.5 feet. Because you don't notice it, because you see yourself every day. But on the other, it's the same thing with spiritual practice. You might be achieving all the peace, tranquility, and all the other things that you hoped for, but because it's happening at such a gradual rate, you never realized it. Maybe the problem is not with the practice, but with your attitude.
Well, that's similar to what I've been saying. Have I talked about this before, about the various dimensions of practice and how all that's important? Does this sound familiar? Because it's been on my mind a lot lately. I've been thinking about writing something about it.
Well, say something about it. I don't remember anything about dimensions.
Well, stop this if this sounds familiar. One of the reasons that the religions have been so successful and have a lot of viability over the years and have produced great saints and sages is that they address the whole person.
Yeah.
They have objects of worship for the sentiments and rituals for the body and doctrines for the mind and acts of service toward God or the community as part of the spiritual life. The whole person. If you look at Hinduism essentially has 4 yogas that address those very same dimensions.
Right.
So, and it is also more clearly a doctrine in Hinduism that one may be drawn to a particular yoga, but one can't just simply practice one.
Yes.
And so there are those, and I've known these cases personally, who say, "Well, I'm a jnana. I'm only interested in knowledge, and I've been doing this for a couple of decades, and I'm not enlightened, or the penny hasn't dropped, or whatever." So the question I want to ask is, what are you doing with these other dimensions of your life? Where is the element of service? Where is the element of worship? Where's the element of community?
Yeah.
And if those things had a place, maybe you wouldn't be so hung up about your failure in this one practice, because you're not bringing all of yourself to the practice.
Yeah. That's a good point. That you could say that the only reason you fail is because you don't do it all the way. You don't do it with all of you.
Yes, you don't do it with all of you, and that includes those elements of worship and service and action.
Another thing is, I think people tend to have it backwards. They say, I'm predisposed towards knowledge, so I'm going to take that all the way. I would say, if you're predisposed to knowledge, that means you're already a bit out of balance. So balance it out with more service, more love.
Yeah,
that's right.
Then people will say, "No, I'm all about knowledge. That's cooler."
Right. Well,
worship.
Well, they claim to have knowledge, but they don't know what it is to practice. The other dimensions, is that what you call them? Yeah.
Sure, dimensions. And I see that a lot.
Yeah.
I really see that a lot.
Yeah, especially in this tariqa. Not to mention, first off, that it's too many people have said, I'm jnana and nothing else. Let's completely disregard the paths of love and service and everything else. And not only that, but I think a lot of people don't really know what knowledge is, because spiritual knowledge doesn't mean academic ability or how many papers you've written. Some of the greatest quote unquote knowledge saints have been illiterate or uneducated in the modern sense. It's not about knowledge in terms of accumulation of facts. It's about Gnostic wisdom that touches a particular part your soul. And it's really, we are these whole things. And one of the great things about yoga is it teaches you real yoga, not the fake yoga. It teaches you about these centers of the body. And the fact is you've got the heart, you've got the mind, you've got all of these different centers, and you have to exercise all of them, not just physically, but spiritually. And, if you think that you're going to have great wisdom and great love without having service, you're already in the wrong direction. Look to someone like Francis of Assisi, a great saint that was also having a love for all of creation and performing service. All of the saints were whole individuals, and that's the difference. That's what makes them saints, is that they're entire, they're whole, they're connected.
Yes, holy, as the term, of course, means whole.
Right. And even if you're following, say, a path of love, then you still have pointers to that, because you should love the Lord thy God with all thy mind, all thy heart,
Right.
And all thy strength. And that sort of covers the other three.
Yep.
And it's not simply a question of some piece of knowledge to figure out why you seem to have an inability to do something. It may be that, that's just on another level, in another dimension or whatever. But you might discover the answer to that if you got a little bit more into, another yoga.
Right. But yes, I think the spiritual life calls for the whole person.
Right. And so the big question to find the answer to is, why can't I give all of myself?
And I think part of it is a problem that modern religions face is, in to a large extent, a religion is training someone for reunion with the divine, or a knowledge that you're already united with the divine. But there's a whole set of things that work these different centers. And the problem is, the more rationalist we've become, the more we tended to get rid of certain things. And, we desperately need the cycles of the day, the cycles of the month and the year, a connection with the cosmos, ritual. We need ritual even more than we need bread, not in a sense of, a connection to idols or something, but in a way of making us feel connected with that which is at all times. And that is why there's more truth in Catholicism than Protestantism, more in Orthodoxy than, either of those to a large extent. Why there's, Islam, and specifically Sufism has something still left in it. Why, someone like Sheikh Isa went to Islam, because there is that connection to things. But, it's modern Islam, Protestantism, modern Hinduism, they're all going the way of like, oh, let's attend some sort service, once a week. Let's, show up for some sort of religious function during major holidays, and pray occasionally, and that's our religion, and that just doesn't cut it. On the other hand, someone that's devoted to things like meditation and yoga and whatnot, that alone doesn't cut it. Reading all the books on spiritual anthropology and metaphysics, that doesn't cut it. You need everything to come together. If you take one piece out of the puzzle, that doesn't do anything for you. You need all of the pieces.
Right. And, the distribution of the different elements may be, different because people are different, and the proper balance, might not be the same, for another person as it is for you. But the thing is, you can't even be prescriptive about, how much you should know from the other yogas. It's experiential,
Right.
and so is real knowledge.
Well, I think we all agree.
Yeah.
If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to my channel.